He's going to teach us all about growing hops. So here you go, Ron.
Thank you. Good morning. Afternoon, I guess it is now. My name is Ron Yovich. My wife is Michelle. She's in the back there. We're the owners and operators of LJ Farms, like I said. I'd like to thank the Brew Hut for having us out here. And this is a great opportunity for everybody to learn about how to grow hops. And that's what we do for a living for the last 6 years. So. LJ Farms, we are a 10-acre hop farm up in Longmont, Colorado. We actually live in Parker, my wife and I, we live in Parker, Colorado. Commute up to the farm and farm up there. And like I said, we run a 10-acre farm. We're the largest commercial hops farm in the Front Range of Colorado right now. There's a half a dozen other hops farms around on the Front Range. The bigger farms in Colorado are on the western slope. Out in Grand Junction, Olathe area, but there's certainly a viable crop that we can grow here on the Front Range as well. So we sell our hops to local breweries. We sell a lot of our hops to the Colorado Native brand of beers, and we do a lot of fresh hop beers at the end of the season every year, where we pick hops and run them straight to the kettle and brew fresh hop beers. If you've ever been out to the Fresh Hop Beer Festival in September, that's when all the fresh hop beers come out. It's pretty fun time. Everybody comes out with their own varieties and different types of beers, so that's a lot of fun. I'm going to run through some slides. We're going to go through the whole process of basically planting hops from rhizomes. I think, as they said, the rhizomes are all in right now. So if you pre-ordered your rhizomes, you'll be picking those up today if you haven't already. And if you haven't pre-ordered them, we brought a bunch of extras, so you're more than welcome to stop by there and grab some. At our farm, we grow 6 varieties. We grow Nugget, Cascade, Chinook, Crystal, Tettnanger, and Mount Hood. Some of those varieties are real good for Colorado. Some of them aren't that good, but we like to grow them anyway, just because we like to have those varieties around. So we brought rhizomes from all those varieties that you're welcome to purchase at the Brew Hut. So if you're here to learn about growing hops, you probably already know what hops are. A lot of people know that hops are used to flavor and bitter beer, but a lot of people don't really know what they look like or how they're grown. The family name is called Humulus lupulus. A lot of you have probably heard of the glands that are inside the hop cone, which is the lupulin gland. That's what we're looking for. That's what you use to flavor and bitter the beer. This is a relatively short presentation, by the way, so feel free anytime if you want to stop me and ask questions. This is going to be a very interactive session, so please feel free to stop me, ask any questions that you want. One big misnomer in hops is that people call it a hop vine. And it's not actually a vine. A vine is like a grapevine. It sends out tendrils and it hooks onto things and allows it to grow up. Hops are what they call a vine because they have small fingers that they grab onto with, which is why hops don't really grow up fences very well. They don't really grow up trellises or up lattice very well like a grapevine will. So we need to have something else to run the hops on. They will grow on those things, they just don't do it as well. Hops are a perennial plant, so once you plant them, they keep on coming back every year. If you get a good variety and a good rhizome, they'll last anywhere from 30 to 50 years. And they'll grow a root up to about 12 feet deep. So they'll take over their spot and get a pretty good stronghold. They are yeah, go ahead.
Well, apparently they're cold hardy hops. Does the cold climate ever affect them any?
The cold climate affect them?
Yeah, like frost.
Yeah, so hops are very hardy down to probably, some varieties are hardy down to 40 below in the wintertime. They'll overwinter at up to 40 below. We'll get to another slide here that'll show you kind of the growing regions for hops and talk a little bit about that. You can't grow them in the tundra and you can't grow them in Mexico, but there is a pretty wide range of region where you can grow hops. So in Colorado, they're very easy to grow. They're very hardy plants. So The hops do have a male and a female species. It's the female species that we're looking for that grows the actual cone and has the lupulin glands that we use for the beer. The only reason that a male species would ever be introduced is if you're going to try and breed a new species. So, for instance, in our hop yard, everything in our yard is female cones. We don't want males in our yard because we don't want any kind of cross-pollination and cross-breeding going on there. So if I have a nugget variety in my yard, I don't want to crossbreed it and have it, 3 years from now end up being something different than what I thought it was. So that's why we only look for the female species. So big question that we always get, do hops grow in Colorado? You don't see a lot of hops farms around here. If you drive around in Washington State or Oregon, and you'll see the big hops farms out there. They grow thousands of acres of hops in Washington State in the Yakima Valley. And if you're driving on, I think it's I-82 that goes up from Yakima into Ellensburg, you'll see hops all the way around on the sides of the road. They do grow in Colorado. So the optimum growing zone, as you see here, is between the 35th and the 55th parallel. Which you can see Denver, Colorado is right around the 40th parallel. So we're kind of on the lower end of that spectrum. And the further down you get into that range towards the 35th parallel, the better it is to be at a higher altitude. So Colorado really is a good climate for growing hops. What we don't have in Colorado right now is we don't have the infrastructure similar to what Washington has. So Washington has all the big processors for the hops. So they can take the hops and dry them and pelletize them. And Colorado's just starting to get that. We've been doing this now for 6 years. And about 2 years ago, we got our first pelletizer in Colorado. So we're getting there. As more and more hops farms start to spring up in Colorado, and we start to get a little bit better control over what we're doing here and get better understanding of how they grow and how they operate. Colorado will start to be a little bit bigger player in the hops part. It kind of goes along with the fact that Colorado has so many breweries popping up. So people are looking for local hops, they're looking for locally grown products, and our phones are ringing all the time trying to get us to grow more. Questions about that? Like I said, our farm in Longmont is 4,900 feet in elevation. Our yard in Parker is 6,000 feet in elevation, and we've grown them very successfully in both places. So they'll grow here in Colorado very well. So what you're looking for here today is the rhizomes. That's what you're going to start your plants with. When we started the farm, we actually started our farm from tissue culture. So the reason we did that is we wanted clean rootstock. So if you get a rhizome that's 30 years old, there's a chance that it might have some sort of a disease or the yields are going to be a little bit lower on those. So we went with a certified disease-free clean rootstock on ours. All of our rhizomes are certified disease-free when we sell them. So that's what you're looking for. The rhizome is basically, just like it says there, it's a stem that grows underground. Just like a tree would put out a stem that comes out from the trunk and shoot across your yard and send up new trees out of your yard that you're cutting down all the time, hops are going to do the exact same thing. They're going to shoot runners off in all directions and have new plants coming up all the time. So as a farmer, we have to control that. We have to kind of keep those down. That's why we cut the rhizomes. So it's actually another revenue stream for us. We can sell the rhizomes, but even if we're not selling them, we have to cut them and kind of clean up that yard. Otherwise, it'll just kind of take over the whole thing. We want to keep it concentrated to the crown of the plant, so that it puts all of its energy into growing up and not out.
So how do you do that? How do you keep it from?
You can't stop it from doing it. It's going to do it, but so what we do is in the springtime we go in and we pull those rhizomes and cut them off.
Okay. So you go find the little.
You find the runners and you pull them and cut them. It's exactly what we do. And then we cut them into small pieces like this and sell them off, so people like you can start new plants in your yard. We also sell to commercial farms that are starting up. There was a farm in Berthoud a couple of years ago that was just getting going, and he had 4 acres of hops that he was putting in. He bought all of his rhizomes from us, so we went out and cut them all for him. So we could do that as well.
What's your spacing between the rows?
At our farm? At our farm, our plants are spaced about 3.5 feet apart inside the rows, and then each row is 10 feet apart. We have what we call what do we call it? It's a high density planting. So ours are spaced a little closer together than some of the farms that you would see out in Washington State. When they're growing 700 to 800 acres of hops, they can have a little bit more spacing between their plants, and they can kind of go both ways in the field. Ours are a lot tighter packed, so we can only go up and down the rows. I'll show you. We'll get to a picture of one of our rows.
Are you mowing or spraying for the weeds?
Yes, a little bit of both. Yeah. So as a backyard grower, I did everything organically, and I would just pull the weeds and manage the weeds that way. Manage all of our pests organically. As a 10-acre farmer, we tried to be organic for the first year and a half, and it just about killed us. So we've got a thistle problem at our farm, and so we had to start spraying. We couldn't handle it anymore. It was just too much. So these rhizomes, it's tough to see on here, but the rhizomes have small little nodes. You can see up at the top of the, just very top of the one. Pointer. Oh, can you see the cursor? So yeah, okay. So there, you see that cursor right there? That's a node right there. So that's what you're looking for on your rhizome. Is those nodes right there. And we'll get into that when we go into the planting portion of it. But as long as it has a node like that, it'll grow a new hop plant. So variety, this is where you choose what variety of hops do you want to grow. First things first is if you're in Colorado, you want to know what grows well in Colorado. Every variety of hops is going to grow in Colorado. You can get anything to grow here. There are certain hops that will grow better than others, and those are going to be the rhizomes that you're going to see here. Now there's two varieties that we grow. They're both noble hop varieties, the Tettinger and the Mount Hood. We grow them because we wanted to grow a noble hop variety and sell those. They don't really grow very well in Colorado. They grow well. I shouldn't say they don't grow well. They grow well in Colorado. They don't give us the same kind of yields as we get from our other plants. But we'll continue to grow them. We only have a small portion of our field that's dedicated to those two varieties. So most of our field is dedicated to the better varieties for Colorado, which are the Cascade, Chinook. The Nuggets grow really well. Crystals grow really well here for us. So a lot of that depends with what are you going to do with your hops? What are you growing them for? Are you growing them to brew your own beer? What kind of hops do you like to brew with? You know, that's a big question. If you like Cascade hops in your beer, and that's what you like to brew with, then that's what you should grow. If you like Nuggets, if you like real bitter beers, and you want high alpha stuff, then you should grow the Nuggets. I know when we talked to this lady here, she doesn't even like beer, but she likes to grow hops. So in that case, maybe you look for a different variety that's a little more decorative. Some of the hops will have bigger leaves and be a little bit prettier to look at. Some of the cones are actually different colors. Crystal hops have kind of a striation in it that's real cool looking. So you can grow it just for the decorative purposes of it. Hops can be used for, at the end of the season, you can cut them down and you can make wreaths and swags and decorative types of things out of them. A lot of people like to do that. So it just depends on what you're looking for. Aroma versus bittering, high alpha hops versus the lower alpha hops or the dual purpose hops. Cascades are kind of a dual purpose hop. If you're familiar with Cascade hops, they're typically in the range of about 6.5 alpha, 6.5 to 7. Here in Colorado, we've been growing them at about 8.5 or 9% alpha. Something to do with just the terroir or the growing season here that we have. We're able to produce Cascade hops with higher alpha than they do in Washington. Chinooks, Nuggets, those are going to be your higher alpha ones. Those all grow very well here. And again, same thing, that last point. Are you looking for something that's the highest yield you can get? Are you looking for something that's going to be an aggressive grower and grow to the top of your trellis as fast as it can? It all depends on what you're looking for. So if you have questions about different varieties, I'll be happy to talk at least about the 6 varieties that I'm familiar with that I grow, and tell you kind of how how those work for us. So what do hops need to grow? Number one thing they need is vertical space. Hops grow, they want to grow up. Hops want to grow tall. And they'll grow, I said up here, up to 20 feet. They'll actually grow up to 30 feet or higher. It just depends on how high you want to let them go and what your system is. Our farm, we're trellised at 18 feet high. So this is actually a picture of one of our rows. This is our Chinook row from last year. Then you're looking down one of the rows. So it's about 1,150 feet long down that row. And hops on both sides. The hops are kind of angled into the middle so that you get sunlight on both sides. So the hops love to have lots and lots of full sun. That's part of the reason why they grow in between the 35th and the 55th parallel, because they need at least 8 hours of sunlight a day during the growing season. And so the higher you get in latitude, the longer the days are. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any pruning or training?
Yes. That's coming. That's coming. He asked if there was any pruning or training that we do, and yes, we're going to talk about that here in a second. You have to train the hops. So what else do they need? They need something to climb. And like I said, hops are a vine, not a vine. So they will climb just about anything, but they'll climb certain things a lot better than they will other things. We use what we call coir twine, which is a coconut fiber twine. It's real easy for the hops to grab onto the coconut fibers. You can use a sisal twine, you can use rope, you can use string. They will climb up fence posts, cedar, rough cedar, they'll climb up that pretty well. First couple of years of hops growth, they're going to have a harder time climbing anything big like a fence post or a tree trunk. But as they mature, when the hops start to mature after about 3 years, they'll climb just about anything. They climb up our trellis posts, which are about 5-inch, 6-inch diameter beetle kill pine, and they'll climb those things like crazy once they get going. So again, direct sunlight, at least 120-day growing season is required for hops, and at least 8 hours of sunlight. So for Colorado, really the only concern is what side of the house you're going to grow them on if you're growing them in your backyard. You got to have them on the south facing or the west side. On the east side, they're just not going to get enough sunlight during the day to make them happy. They'll still grow there, but they're not going to grow as well, and they're not going to yield as well. Soil is a big concern. We have a lot of clay soils here. Our farm is very loamy clay soil. You want to make sure you have good drainage, so you want to make sure when you plant the rhizomes that you dig down at least a foot deep and give it a lot of compost and lighten the soil up a little bit for it, just so it has good drainage. Pretty much just like anything else that you would plant in your garden in Colorado. And the pH range, 6 to 7.5. You can amend any soil, especially if you're planting in small gardens, areas like that. You can amend your soils to get lower pHs if you've got a high pH soil. It's not as big of a deal, but it certainly is, ideal for them to be in that range. So planting the rhizomes. You want to plant your rhizomes after the last hard frost, which in Colorado we might be there right now. We might not be. We're probably past our last hard frost. A hard frost is probably anything lower than about 20 degrees here in Colorado, especially with this, because for us, if we get a hard frost, the next day we get a good sunny day and it's 45 degrees. Snow doesn't really affect it. It's just a deep hard frost is going to hurt those things. You can start your rhizomes inside in pots and then move them outside. They're pretty easy to move around and transplant. Obviously, we're cutting the rhizomes from our field and bringing them down here, and you're going to take them and put them in your yards. They're going to continue to grow. So they're a hardy little plant that just really doesn't have a lot of hard time growing. Again, we talked about that. Dig a hole about a foot deep and 2 feet in diameter. You want to loosen up the soil. You want to amend the soil with some compost. Give it some good nutrients. Hops use a lot of nitrogen. anything that grows 30 feet in the air is going to take a ton of nitrogen out of the ground. So you're going to want to replace all the nitrogen components that you can. Another big one that we tend not to think about too much is boron. And so if you start to see yellow leaves on your hops, and you know your nitrogen content is good, the next thing you want to start looking for is boron on hops. And there are some soil amendments that you can find at any local store here that'll have boron listed on there. In terms of drainage, so like I said, in Colorado we have kind of clay soils, so it's best if you can mound the soil around the top of the plant when you plant it. So a couple inches high, you want to mound it just so the water drains off to all the sides of it. And then just cover up the rhizomes by a couple of inches. So the rhizomes, like we saw before, you saw the nodes on there. You want to plant those and drop them into the ground horizontally so the nodes are pointing up. You can plant them vertically as well. Some of these rhizomes that we brought in, they already have shoots coming up out of them. So you're going to want to plant those vertically and have the shoots pointing up, and then they'll just continue to grow up out of the ground from there. They'll grow if they're pointing down, and they'll figure out how to get back to the top of the soil. It'll just take a little bit longer. So right now, if you plant one of the rhizomes that we brought, you should see something coming up out of the ground here in the next week to 2 weeks. If you plant them with the nodes pointing down, it'll maybe take an extra week, maybe 3 weeks, and then they'll start popping up. And then water. Water, basically, for the first year, you're going to want to probably water them just about every day. They like a lot of water, but they like to be damp, not wet. So they like to get water and then let it drain, and then get water again. And they'll use a lot of water. For our farm, we use a drip system. Our entire 10 acres is on drip line. So each plant has a drip emitter going right to it. So we can control exactly how much water goes to each plant.
Do you water consistently all day, or like just at one point a day?
So once a day, yeah.
Like in the morning. You said you have a drip system, so
Yeah,
it's
once
slowly emitting.
in the first year, once a day, yeah. So now that we're 6 years in, we're a lot more established now. So now we're doing a little bit more deep watering, less frequency. So once every 3 days in the summertime, something like that, we'll put 5 gallons to each plant. And that's that system drips a gallon an hour, so we're running that for 5 hours on a day, and then letting it go for a couple of days. So there you see it. That's basically how you plant a rhizome. On a commercial level, when they're planting a whole field of rhizomes, they'll basically just take a shovel and just pop a little hole open, drop the rhizomes in, and cover it back up. They're not as concerned of how long it's going to take for those things to come back up out of the ground. We have 11,000 plants at our farm, and we only have 10 acres. So these big places out in Washington that are planting a couple hundred acres a year, when they decide to change varieties, they got to move pretty quickly and get through there. So in your backyard, you can take the time and make sure that the nodes are pointing up and everything's going to work out well for you. So stringing and training the vines, this is the next step. You want to make sure that you have some place for them to grow. So you can grow them right on the side of your house. That's what we did in our house in Parker. I stuck the strings on the side of the house and run them straight down to the plants and let them just climb up the side. Like I said, you can create your own trellises in your backyard. You can run them on clotheslines, whatever works for you. Obviously, like I said, the higher the better. For our trellis at 18 feet, about 80% of our yield comes in the last 4 feet. So the 14 to 18 feet range is where about 80% of our yield is. Whatever you're going to use to let them climb, the twine, rope, string, whatever you decide you want to use, it doesn't take a whole lot of that. You know, if you've only got 1 or 2 plants, you're going to run maybe 1 string to each one in the first year, and then as they start to mature in the next couple of years, you can run 2 or 3 strings to each plant. Go ahead.
The hops full length
Of the actual cones themselves?
I mean, do they grow from the bottom to the top?
The actual hop cones themselves? Okay. So the question is, do the hop cones actually grow all the way? Does the plant produce cones all the way up from the bottom to the top? That's what you're asking, right? Okay. And the answer is yes, they do. But again, if the plant is allowed to grow that high, you're going to see a lot more hop cones towards the top than you do towards the bottom. Okay, and we're going to get into one more thing about stripping the bottoms of the plants here. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. Now you can kind of see it on here on this picture towards the top, where you see a lot more of the actual cones up there at the top than you would at the bottom. But they will start to grow all the way through the bottom. The other thing that you get during the season is you get more shoots coming up. And when those shoots start coming up, they'll want to climb up that same line. And so if you don't cut those back and you allow them to grow, then you'll have hops at different levels at the time you harvest. You need to anchor the string into the ground. You can use pretty much any kind of a stake to anchor them into the ground. Some places have the drip lines, and they tie the string to the drip line to hold it down. On a commercial level, we use what we call a W clip. It's basically just a skinny piece of sheet metal cut into a W shape. And we have a tool that pushes that down into the ground, so the string goes underneath the W and pushes it down. And then when the string tries to pull up, the W kind of opens itself up and holds it down on the ground. But like I said, you can use anything. In our yard in Parker, we just used regular garden stakes and tie the strings to them, and they hold them down just fine. Again, 1 string per plant in the first year is probably going to be good. If you try to do too many strings in the first year, you're going to stress the plant out a little bit. As your plants start to mature, 2nd, 3rd, 4th year, then they can take up to 4 strings per plant once they're mature. What else? Questions on that? So when you go to train the vines, you're gonna want those plants to be about 12 inches to 24 inches tall out of the ground, coming out of the ground. The shoots will come up straight up out of the ground, up to about 2 feet tall, and that's when you're going to want to actually train them to the string. And basically, all you do to train them is you just help them twist themselves around the string. So the key to that is that they go clockwise. So hops grow kind of like a sunflower, how it follows the sun. The hops do the same thing. They'll follow the sun all the way around, and then wrap themselves around the string that way. So if you wrap them the other way, they'll figure it out eventually, and they'll start to go back, but they'll want to unwind first. So if you wrap them clockwise, and really it just takes 2 or 3, and depending on what you wrap them to, like for our coconut fiber twine, once we wrap it 2 or 3 times around there, you can feel the hop kind of hooking itself to that and grab it on. It won't go anywhere after that. Water. So water is very important. First year hops require lots of water every day. Basically, you want to water them. You want to set them up on a drip system. You want to set them up so they're getting water every day.
Just tell them they're training to be really gentle with the tips because they come off really easily. And once that happens, you have to have another one straight.
I was just reminded of something. So when you are training them, one of the things we learned early on is when you go to wrap the hops around the plant, around the string, you have to be real careful with the tips of those, because the tips, when they're young plants and they're just coming out of the ground, the tips are very, very fragile. And so you can even just like slip with your hand and knock it, and you'll knock that tip right off, and then it won't grow. You'll have to start another one going up again. Another issue that we have in Colorado and that we've had in Longmont is hail. So as those tips, the tip is what is going to grow all the way to the top. Once it gets to the top, after about the summer equinox is about the time that it should be at the top of the vine, and then it'll start to actually put its energy into branching out and growing wide and forming offshoots. Hail, if you get hail, it'll knock those tips off as well, and then they'll stop growing, and they'll think they're done growing, and they'll start to grow out to the sides. They will, hops will regenerate their own new tip to start growing up again, but it just sets you back a little bit. But like I said, they're pretty hardy little guys, gals. Mature plants, I think I told you guys, mature plants can grow root up to 12 feet deep, and they actually grow a tap, and then they'll grow the side shoots, the rhizomes off the side of that. So once the plants are more mature in your second and third year, then you can start doing much more deep watering and less frequently. So like I said, we'll water once every 3 days at our farm, and just let it get real deep and soaked, and then let it dry out for a couple of days. Drip irrigation is the best, what we found, as opposed to flood irrigation. Furrow irrigation works. If you're familiar with furrow irrigation, you're basically digging trenches along the sides of the plants and letting the water run down through there. The only problem with that is you never really know how much water each plant's getting. Wet foliage or pooling at the base of a plant can lead to what we call to fungal diseases. One of the worst is the Downy Mildew. So hops originally in the United States originally were grown in New York State, and they've migrated west over the course of the last 150 years because they have so much trouble growing them in those states where it's just too moist, too humid, and they have lots of problems with Downy Mildew. So if your plants are real wet down at the bottom, or if you have them in a garden where you have a bunch of other stuff growing around them, and it's just humid down there, they're going to be more susceptible to that. We don't have a lot of problem with mildews here, but you can do a lot to help keep it from happening on your plants as well. I say be creative. So we talked about, like, when I brew beer and I run the work chiller, and the water just runs out into our garden as I'm running the work chiller. So you can use that as you're watering. Depends on how often you're going to brew. So nutrients, we talked a little bit about this again. Before you plant your rhizomes, you're going to want to dig that hole down about a foot, fill it up with some high nitrogen compost, and you can use other things in there. You can use your own compost. You can use spent grain. You can use grass clippings. The hop vines from the year before. When you cut your hop vines down and you pick the cones off of that, reuse those hop vines in your garden. Those things are full of nitrogen. When we do them at our farm, we have a picking machine that we run the hops through that does the picking for us. And at the end of the picker, it shreds up the vine into small pieces, and then we can compost that and put it back into our field. So it's a great source of nitrogen to get those back in there. Every spring and every fall, top dress your hops with compost. A couple of things. Obviously, that's going to add nutrients back to your soil and promote soil ecology. It will also help to neutralize the pH of that soil and get you back into that optimal zone of pH for your soil. 3 or 4 times during the growing season, you can fertilize something that's going to add nitrogen. You can do a compost tea. We use straight urea at our farm, 48% nitrogen urea. And I do 2 things. One is a foliar application where we put that urea into solution and actually just spray it onto the hop foliage. And the other is just to put urea pellets straight to the ground and let those kind of soak in. The last application before harvest, towards the end of July. Harvest in Colorado for us is around the end of August, 1st of September. It's variety dependent, so certain varieties are gonna mature earlier and be ready for harvest earlier. For us, that's good because we have 6 varieties and it helps us spread our harvest out. over the course of about 3.5, 4 weeks. So we start with whatever variety is ready first, and we just start moving down the rows into the other varieties. In your backyards, if you're growing a couple of different varieties, you're gonna have a couple of different harvests, basically. There's about a 2-week window for harvest once a variety is ready. If you leave it on the vine too long, it's gonna kind of sour on the vine, and it's not gonna be real great to make beer with. So you have to kind of catch it at the right time. We'll talk a little bit about that. Pests and disease. Again, in Colorado, we're pretty fortunate. We don't have a lot of pests that affect our hops. Biggest one for us has been aphids. We seem to get aphids at our farm quite a bit. And spider mites are kind of a big issue depending on where you're at. So aphids are pretty easy to control, actually. And we use natural predators for the control of the aphids. And spider mites tend to congregate in dusty areas. So for us, our farm's kind of tucked back behind off the county road. But a lot of farms, if you're up against a dirt road where people are driving back and forth and it's creating a lot of dust, that's where you're starting to see spider mite problems. Downy mildew, we talked a little bit about. Eastern common caterpillar has been one that we just recently ran across at our farm. They started into a couple of varieties. Was it last year? Last year? I think it was last year. And we talked to a couple of experts about how to handle those things, but basically they ended up just kind of handling themselves before they did too much damage, so it was kind of nice. But in terms of natural predators, for aphids, we use ladybugs, lady beetles. A lady beetle will eat 500 times its weight in aphids in a day. So we release ladybugs at the farm, and they take care of the aphids for us. You can buy ladybugs at any of the local garden shops. In Tagawa, locally, close by here, they'll sell them little containers with about 500 ladybugs in them. Yeah, go ahead.
You get problems with rabbits?
Rabbits?
Yeah.
We have rabbits at the farm, but they're not really a problem. For us, the biggest problem for us would be voles, the little mice. They're kind of like mice, which is why one way for us to do weed control at our farm would be to lay plastic out across and just cut the holes where the crowns are. The problem with that is the voles will get underneath that plastic and they'll start eating the roots, and they'll actually eat underneath the ground. Rabbits haven't really been a problem. They kind of burrow out there and find their holes, but they don't eat the plants. So it hasn't been an issue for us. Go ahead.
I haven't really a lot of Chinese beetles this past year. Or Chinese beetles being a problem.
I've never heard of Chinese beetles attracted to hops. I know that they have them out here, but I've never heard of them being attracted to hops or affecting the hops at all. So, like I said, the ladybugs eat the aphids. They don't affect the plants at all. Spider mites, they have natural predators for spider mites as well. You can just Google spider mite predator, and I don't know the names of them, but same thing. You buy them from a nursery and just release them in the garden, and they'll take care of the spider mites. Pesticides. We don't use pesticides at our farm. We do use herbicides. We have, like I said, we have a thistle problem at our farm, so we use herbicides. We use a couple of different herbicides. 2,4-D we use to control weeds in between the rows. We can't spray them directly on the hops. I have to use a guarded sprayer to spray them, because they'll kill the hops too. We also use a product similar to Roundup around the outsides of the farm to control the thistle from the outside. Inside the hops, the only thing that I've found that we've been able to use to manage weeds inside the hop rows is a paraquat. It's a product called Remoxone, and it's a commercial product. You have to be a licensed pesticide applicator to use it. But it actually chemically burns down all the plant, and it'll burn the hops too. The only thing that it doesn't do is that it doesn't burn the actual stem of the hop. So it allows the hop to continue to grow. So what we can do with it is actually use it on the bottom 2 or 3 feet of the hop, and basically kind of chemically strip the bottom of the plant and kill the weeds that are down there. So I think we talked, your question was about whether the hops produce cones all the way up and down. And they will. Again, the bottom 4 or 5 feet of the plant is going to be very sparse with hop cones. So the higher you let them grow, the more they're going to be concentrated to the top of that plant. In terms of taking care of the mildew issues and stripping the bottoms of the plants, like I said, we use a chemical to chemically strip those plants, but in a small garden situation, if you're growing 5 or 6 plants, you're going to want, your best bet is to go down and physically just pull the leaves from the bottoms of those plants, maybe 2 or 3 feet high, just to give them some airflow down at the bottom and take care of any mildew issues down at the bottom of the plant. And so you're not going to end up seeing any hop cones down that low because you're going to strip those off. Questions about that? Go ahead.
Okay, so how do you tell when the hops are ready to harvest? You can't look at them.
That's what we're talking about right now. Yeah. So how do you know when they're ready? When's harvest? That's what everybody wants to know, right? When can I use these things? On a commercial level, we do what we call dry matter testing. You can do this at home too. The problem with doing it at home, if you only have 2 plants and you only have a couple pounds of hops, you got to use about a pound of them to do the dry matter test. So when we grow 10,000 pounds of hops, we can spare a couple pounds to do our dry matter testing. Basically what that is we pull the hops wet, we weigh them, we dry them all the way down to 0% moisture, and then we get a percentage of the weight that's left on there. The higher that percentage is, the closer we are to being able to pick them. It kind of tells you how much lupulin is inside those cones. We look for a percentage of anywhere from about 24 to 28% dry matter is when we start to harvest our cones. On a backyard scale, basically you're going to use the look, smell, and feel method. And you can see this picture here. That's basically a hop cone that's just, when you take a hop cone off, a wet cone, you can basically just pull it apart and it will come exactly in half, just like that, so you can see the inside of the plant. And what you're looking for is you're looking for the yellow powder in there, the lupulin powder. It's not really a powder, it's a gland, but it looks like powder at that point. As those cones come out, so the way hops grow, the vine will grow to the top of the trellis, whatever height you have. Around the middle of June, end of June, it'll start to grow shoots and side growth. Around the middle of July in Colorado, it'll actually start to form flowers, and then the cones actually grow around those flowers. So the cones will start to appear around the 1st of August. And then for us, our noble hop varieties are typically ready to pick around the middle of August. Higher alpha hops, our nuggets, are usually ready right around Labor Day. But as you start to pull these cones off and open them up and look at them, that powder, that yellow lupulin inside will be a very light colored yellow. And if you pull one each day in the month of August, you'll start to see that color darken. So what you're looking for is that color that you see right there on the screen. It's kind of more of an orangish yellow color. So if you're not familiar with the process, you've never done it before, you're going to want to try it. Maybe pull one cone off every day during the harvest season and just watch it grow in years in the years to come, then you'll kind of know exactly what you're looking for. You can also smell the hops when they're ready. If you've ever smelled a fresh hop, if it's not quite ready, it'll still have a grassy, earthy smell to it. When they start to get more mature and ready to actually harvest, you'll actually be able to start to smell the hop oils in there. We take them and rub them between our hands and really mash them down in your hands, and then you can kind of get that smell off of there. And then feel. Feel is a big one for us. Basically, when the hops are ready, they're going to be more paper-like. So they're going to dry themselves out a little bit, and they're going to be kind of paper-like. So when you squeeze the hop and let it go, it'll come back and take its shape again. So when they're not ready to be picked yet, and you squeeze it, it'll stay smushed. So how do you harvest hops? Your question was about how do you know when to pick them, right?
Yeah, when to pick them, and also, how do you climb way up there to get them?
So that's another big part of individually how you're gonna grow them. So if you're gonna grow them 18 feet high, you gotta have a way to get up 18 feet high to get them, right? So if you're gonna, for us, we have a scaffolding on the back of a pickup truck that we drive down the road. That's how we cut them down. At my house in Parker, I just had a ladder, and I would climb up the ladder and cut them down and pick them. Other people I've seen that have pulleys.
That's what I was about to say.
They have a pulley system so that you can hook them up at the top or down below, raise it up on a pulley system for the season, and then drop it down when it's time to harvest or when it's time to check them.
How high is the individual plant going to grow?
It'll grow as high as you allow it to grow. If your trellis is 18 feet high, it'll grow 18 feet high. If you put them to the roof of your house at the peak and it's 24 feet, it'll grow 24 feet. And if you grow them on your fence at 6 feet high, they'll grow 6 feet high, and they'll start to look for other ways to grow. So harvest for us, in our farm, we have a picking machine that does the harvest for us. It's basically a stationary combine thrash machine. We cut the vine down, the whole thing, all 18 feet of it, cut it at the top, cut it at the bottom, take it out of the field and feed it through the picking machine. In your backyard, you can do the exact same thing. You can cut the whole vine down and lay it on the ground and pick off the cones. You can have picking parties and have lots of beer available and have all your friends over. And it takes a lot of time to do. It's a fairly labor-intensive process. If you grow these things right, you're going to have hundreds of cones on every vine, so it's going to take a while to pick all those off. But you'll figure out the best way to do that. You can also pick them off the vine as it's still hanging. If you have a ladder, you want to climb up a ladder and just pull them off. You can pick them off a little bit at a time. Also, so for us, like certain parts of our field have cones that are ready before others, only by a couple of days. But we can pick part of our. I can pick 2 rows of my Chinooks in one day, and then come back 2 days later when the other ones are ready to pick those. And you can do the same thing with yours. You might leave them hanging and pick a portion of them off, and then come back a few days later and pick a few more. So that's kind of up to you individually how you want to do that. But again, the easiest way is to cut the whole thing down. And when you cut them, you're going to cut it off at the top, whatever your string is, wherever it's hanging from, and then you want to leave it about 2 feet from the bottom where you cut it at the bottom. That'll, especially in those first couple of years, is that we're harvesting these things at the end of August. Well, they're still growing for another couple of months in the ground. And so you leave a couple of feet and continue to water those plants and allow that root structure to develop underground. And then that way you'll be assured that they'll come back every year. So processing hops. the hops that we use here at the brewery, that people use in breweries, and as a home brewer, most people are used to using them in the pellet form. You can't really do that in your backyard. And even us as commercial growers, we don't even have a way to pelletize ours. We have to send them off to be pelletized. So a couple of different ways of using them. First, and the best way, in my opinion, to use them is fresh. That's why you're growing them, right? It's something that you can't buy from the store. It's, you grew it in your own backyard. You want to use them right away. So if you use them within 24 hours and get them into your brew kettle, it'll be some of the best beer you've ever had. This picture here is actually a picture of a couple of bins that we took to Twisted Pine a couple of years ago. Twisted Pine Brewing Company, they did a fresh hop beer with those things. So our farm is about 15 miles from Twisted Pine Brewing. So within 2 hours of being picked, those were inside their kettle, and they made fresh hop beer with those. If you're not going to use them fresh, then you got to dry them. And they need to be dried down to about 8 to 10% moisture in order to store them. So again, commercially we have drying systems that we use. I have a whole drying drawer and heat and everything. But on a home scale, I've seen people use screen doors that they lay on a couple of sawhorses and spread the hops out over the screen door and just let them dry. As long as you can dry them down within 2 or 3 days, then they're going to be fine. And again, there's no way on a small scale to really check the moisture of them. So what you don't want is for them, you don't want to put them in a dehydrator and dry them completely out. They want to have a little bit of moisture, just about 8 to 10%. And again, you can check that if you have a small scale at your house or whatever. That you can weigh them wet and then weigh them again when you think they're dry or as they're drying. And when they get down to that 10% range, then you can pack them away and store them for a while before you use them.
Have you ever froze fresh?
Question is, can you freeze the fresh hops and use them that way? And I don't know the exact answer to that, but my first thought would be no, because those lupulin glands are, when you freeze those, they're gonna burst, and then that's basically what's holding all that good stuff in there. So I've never heard of anybody doing that. So yeah, fresh hops, like I said, they have to be used within 24 hours, basically. Otherwise, you need to dry them right away when you pick them. They'll start to wilt after, on a good hot day in the sun, they'll start to wilt after a couple of hours. And they'll actually start to wilt on the vine when you cut it down. Last year we had a problem with our picker. We had cut down a big, huge section of them and went to run them through the picker. The picker broke. And so we had about 400 pounds of hops sitting there waiting to be picked. And I could just see them wilting in the sun. And so we all jumped in and started hand picking what we could while we were getting the thing fixed. So they'll go bad pretty quickly if you don't get them picked. So that's a big key, really. When you get ready to pick them, just make sure you have enough people there to get them off the vine relatively quickly and get them started drying. And then the whole leaf hops. So using whole leaf hops in your recipes is a little bit different than using the pellets, especially when you grow hops in your own yard, because unless you're going to send them off for analysis, you don't really know what the alpha acids are. So it's kind of a crapshoot a little bit. So for us, it's kind of fun to play with. We brew a new beer every year with the new variety, with each annual variety, and it's a little bit different every year. It's kind of fun. It's never the same.
We can talk about the storage part. After you dry them, what do you do with them? How long can you keep them?
The question is, after you dry them, what do you do with them? How long can you keep them? So hops have what they call a storage index, and we send our hops off to be tested for alpha acids, beta, and a hop storage index. And that gives us an indication of kind of how long those hops are going to be good for. and it's somewhere in the range of anywhere from 4 months to a year if they're stored refrigerated and dried properly. So for us, when we do our hops, we dry them and we bale them. The tighter you can get them into a bale, the less oxygen that's going to get into those hops, the longer they're going to last. So on a home scale, I would say probably 2 to 3 months is ideal. Nothing more than that. But again, I've had hops for 6 months that I've used, and they still come out okay. Keep them in the fridge. Yeah.
Vacuum pack?
You can vacuum pack them. Yeah, you can vacuum seal them. I just put mine in Ziploc bags and store them that way. You probably want to have a separate fridge because they do tend to permeate unless they're vacuum sealed. That smell will tend to permeate, and that flavor will get into meats in the freezer and whatever else. So if you have a beer fridge, you can store them in the beer fridge. It won't hurt that, obviously, but if you're storing cold cuts in there, they're going to taste like hops.
That's not bad.
No? Some people think I had a hop-infused cold brew coffee yesterday. I'd never seen that before. So we put hops in everything. Question is, do we dry the hops and then bale them? Yes, that's exactly what we do. We dry them down to about 8%, then we cure them for about 24 hours. Curing kind of stabilizes the moisture level, and it actually brings it back up. So when hops dry out quickly like that, and then they're allowed to set, they're actually going to take in a little bit of that ambient moisture and rise back up. So we want them to stabilize. And so we'll let them sit for about 24 hours, and then we'll bale them. And our bales, all of our equipment, because we're smaller scale than Washington, our equipment all comes from Europe. And so we use European bales. So our bales are about 120 pounds each. The commercial bales out of Washington, they're a little bit bigger size. Their bales are in the 200 to 220 pound size.
Hop would you typically use to make a 5-gallon batch of beer?
Question is, how many pounds of hops do you use for a 5-gallon batch of beer? So I can tell you, Colorado Native, if you've ever had a Colorado Native, their original lager, they use 1 pound of hops per barrel. So, and a barrel is 2 kegs. So for my home brews, I'll use anywhere from a couple of ounces to maybe a pound of hops in a 5-gallon homebrew batch. Whole cones, yeah. Depends on the variety and what I'm doing.
Fresh hop, you want to use one.
If you're doing fresh hops, you're going to use more. The fresh hops don't release the luculin as well in the boil as the dried ones or the pelletized ones. So yeah, fresh hops take a little bit more. And again, that's something that you just have to kind of play with as a home brewer. You kind of play around with those things. And if you're growing them in your backyard, they're free, right? So you can play with them a little bit more. Go ahead.
So if you're right in the first year, when will you start seeing the flowers and the hops? Will you get it the first year, the second year?
So the question is, will you actually see hop cones the first year? Yeah, absolutely. Depending on the variety, some varieties in Colorado, our experience with Chinooks is that the Chinooks will grow 18 feet in the first year. And you'll actually see, you can potentially see a pound of hops on your plant the first year. Other varieties, the Tettinger maybe is only going to grow 6 feet the first year. And you might not even see any cones. But yeah, there should definitely be, depending on the variety, you should definitely see some cones the first year. It takes about 3 years to come to full maturity, 3 to 4 years. So after about the second year, you'll start to see, and you'll notice the difference in the spring when they start to come out. These first plants, when they first start to come out, they're going to be thin like a string. They're very, very fragile. After about 3 or 4 years, when they come up, they look like an asparagus coming out.
Can you grow them pots. I read an article that you can. Do you know anything about that?
Question is, can you grow them in pots? Yes, you can. We grow them in whiskey barrels, in like a half whiskey barrel. And yeah, they'll
So one
grow.
plant per half whiskey pot?
You can do more than that, but you'll want to thin it out as it matures. The problem with anything in pots is the winters, because they're more susceptible to damage in the winter. So if it's a pot that you can move inside or into the garage in the wintertime, absolutely. But like I said, we have ours in a whiskey barrel in the back of our yard here in Parker. And I had nuggets in there last year, and they're coming up again this year. So go ahead.
So you were talking about training the vines that came up. So the first year you're only going to train one vine, right? That's right. Is that right?
Oh, that's a good
You're gonna
question.
Trim the rest off.